All right, it's past 1 o'clock, 1:04, and we are scheduled to do a Division 3 orientation. I'm sorry I'm late. I was talking to the speaker about something vastly important. I got an update on our room. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I have a little bit of an agenda I want to talk about, and I know that Mr. Ripple has probably come prepared to give us an education. So we'll start with him, and we'll do some odds and ends at the end. But for the Division 3 folks, we have both extreme experience and extreme lack of experience. So any question anybody wants to ask, we probably have somebody here who can answer it. So just think of this as a kind of an open forum, an open opportunity to address any questions or concerns you may have. Mr. Ripple, do you want to give us a block of instruction?
So I guess first of all, for the new members, my name is Kevin Ripple, and I've been with the LBA. I started with the audit division in 2007, and I've been with the budget division since 2013, and Division 3 specifically since 2016, 2017. So a couple budgets worth of experience there. And feel free to contact me at any time, phone, email, stop by my office. I can tell you where that is, and I'll be glad to help. So typically for these division orientations, we start off with sort of an overview of, in the case of the other divisions, the various agencies that you oversee, and in the case of Division 3, the various divisions within HHS. And normally we would go over the budgets for those divisions, some of the big issue areas, et cetera. But I talked about this with some of my coworkers beforehand, and typically what we find is, especially after the 2-hour morning presentation, people's eyes tend to glaze right over a little bit. So we're going to skip that this year, and I think I'm just going to talk briefly about the process for Division 3. And again, for those of you who've been on the committee before, there's nothing new here, but I'll just go through it for the sake of the newer members. Typically, the committee starts its work in earnest, or the division starts its work in earnest on February 15th when the governor's budget comes out. This time we're going to start things off a little bit earlier than that at Representative Edwards' suggestion. As you may have seen in your email, Janet's scheduled some division meetings on January 23rd, February 1st, and February 3rd. And on those days, HHS is going to come in and talk about selected issue areas. So on the 23rd, they're going to talk about IT systems and priorities, and I believe they're going to be joined by the Commissioner of the Department of Information Technology for that presentation. And then for the subsequent dates, they'll be talking about, in no particular order, manpower and staffing, the status of mobile behavioral health, the status of operations at Hampstead and New Hampshire Hospital, the status of operations and contingency plans for Glencliff Home. They'll be talking about public health. They will be talking about performance metrics and how those are conducted throughout the department. And they'll be talking about any ideas they have for how to pay for employee pay raises and or hiring incentives. So I think you have sort of a full schedule of some major issue areas that HHS will be coming in and talking about. So that'll give you some good ideas for where to focus once the budget process gets going in earnest. Yes.
So are we going to be able to pull Meredith to tell us before the 15th of February, or were we thinking that she would have to come after the governor's budget?
So I conveyed that request to Nathan, and my request was that she'll be here on either the 1st or the 3rd.
Okay, so to talk a little bit about what Mr. Ripple just went over is last year, or 2 years ago rather, was my first term in Division 3, and one of the first things Mr. Ripple asked me is, okay, how would you like to sequence the budget presentations? And I said, I have no idea. Just do them in whatever way makes sense. So now, having gone through it, I was left with the feeling that I had allowed a lot of wasted time between the beginning of the term and the 15th of February. And so what this is really an attempt to do is to bring some issues forward with the disclaimer and with the request for us not to really focus on the money. Let's talk about the programmatics. Let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about the trends, the concerns, that sort of thing. And also, while we're talking on these specific strategic topic areas, for lack of another term, as you get questions that you would have liked to have answered, you can either just ask them and say, when you come back during the budget phase, bring some answers to the following questions. I don't think we should expect that they're going to have numbers or dollar numbers for us, but I do think they ought to be able to talk about the programmatics because, they're on a trajectory they've been on for years. So the intent is to bring some of that orientation to the department forward, and we'll still do the hardcore number issues later, but this is meant to be a chance for you to ask questions of them so that they come prepared after the 15th of February. Yes, sir. No, I'm done.
Just a quick question. Can you request of the presenters that they provide the electronic versions of the documents a day ahead, please?
Yep, sure, we can do that.
Okay. Now, so some of the outlines of what we're going to ask in the strategic topics, Mr. Ripple and I have talked about them. Representative Irf did some heavy lifting on what those topics, some questions for those topics back in October, and sent them to Mr. Ripple back then. So to bring me up to speed, I'm thinking of what Representative Irf was asking of the departments was more detailed than what I've been asking, and I'm just curious how you see us aligned in terms of our one face to the department.
Well, I'm not really sure. I conveyed that request the Representative Irf had made, and I also conveyed your request that the department at least include the Schedule 2 forms that can be found in the agency budget request to the extent that they apply to the governor's recommended budget. So I think at a minimum, their presentations will contain that.
Super. And then Representative Nordgren, you had sent me an email saying that you had some specific issues that you wanted to address with, I think, Glencliff, the Sununu Center, and the New Hampshire Hospital were the three areas that you were particularly interested in. And I think we being broadcast, so we should be using the microphones.
Right,
Yes.
sorry. So I think Philbrook was the question. What's happening?
I think we can ask about Philbrook. I think that is, to me, that's new. I must have dropped the ball. I don't remember asking about Philbrook, but
I don't think so, but we can ask the department to add it to the presentations on February 1st and 3rd if you'd like.
okay.
Thank you.
All right.
And so, sorry, among the areas that Representative Nordgren had asked about, I think the only other one that wouldn't be covered by the department's presentations is the Sununu Center. And it's my understanding, we can certainly ask them to come in and talk about that too, but it's my understanding that there's a special committee that's addressing that as well. So I'm not sure if you wanted that to be taken up in Division 3.
Oh, okay. So the Sununu Center, because per statute, it needs to close on 1 March. I've been working very closely, as have others like Representative Lynn, Representative Pearson, to prepare a bill for the Senate to fast track to get it over here. And as I was talking to the speaker, one of the things we talked about was how we were going to fast track the Sununu bill through the House. And so I probably know as much about that topic as the department at this point, because the ball is really in the legislature's court to get something passed. And so just to go as long as I'm talking about it, for those of you who participated in the debate last year, you'll remember that the committee of conference produced a Sununu bill. We did not end up agreeing to the Sununu bill primarily because of the issue of how big the thing should be. There was a strong advocacy for no more than 6. There was another advocacy for minimum of 12 that could be expanded to 18 should there be an exigent need for it. And that caused the thing to break down. At the same time, when the bill was in Division 3, I had prepared an amendment that had a number of smaller points like leverage co-location, leverage shared services, what should happen to the property once the residents were moved out. It had a number of topics. The Senate last week had a joint HHS and Judiciary Committee hearing where they considered SB 1, Sharon Carson's bill. I brought in the remnants of what I had prepared back in May or June for the Sununu bill that just never got considered. I couldn't get it out of Division 3. So they've amended the bill to where I'm really very happy with it. They're going to vote on it in the Senate tomorrow. I think it's going to pass. Then it's going to go to Senate Finance. Senators Abbas and Birdsell have some financial and other issues with it, so they may want to amend it yet again. So, but the Senate knows they've got to pass us something and get it to us quickly. Once we get it, it'll be assigned to Children and Family Law. The speaker and Representative Pearson's the chair of that, so I'm talking to him. But what the intent is to get the right people from Division 3 to sit in with Children and Family Law so that the committee will take one bite at the Senate bill, get it to the floor, and pass it. If we pass what the Senate passes, then it's ready for the governor's signature and we can beat the 1 March deadline. That's probably way more answer than you wanted, but does that address your concerns about where the Sununu Center issue is?
Yeah, I mostly just wanted an update on where we were with the process, knowing that we had the March 1st deadline and everything. Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. So do you remember where you were at?
I do, yes. So you'll have those presentations at the end of January, early February. And then February 15th or thereabouts, the governor's budget will come out, and the trailer bill, House Bill 2, should come out at the same time. In the past, there's been a couple weeks lag getting House Bill 2 out of the governor's office, but in House Bill 2 from a couple years ago, there was a section requiring that it also come out on February 15th. So you should get that bill to work on at the same time. Right after the governor's budget comes out, the governor will present to the full Finance Committee alongside his budget director. And then usually in the week that follows, certain agencies, including Health and Human Services, will come in and give a presentation to the full committee, and then the division's work will begin in earnest. So you've probably taken a look at the calendar, and you see that the divisions have about 5 weeks after the governor's budget comes out to complete their work. It might look like a little bit longer, it might look like 6 weeks, but the LBA needs time once you've made your decisions to make the changes in the state's budget system and put together what we call a detailed change sheet and the other information that you will need and that Representative Edwards specifically will need to present on the division's recommendations to the full Finance Committee. So that's the long way of saying you've got about 5 weeks to complete your work.
So I heard Mr. Kane say that our Division 3 drop dead date is 23 March. Is that what you heard? Is that the date we're going to consider where Division 3 should have its work done?
I don't have the calendar in front of me, but that sounds about right.
Okay.
I'll verify with him, but that sounds right.
Oh, okay.
So speaking of House Bill 2, one thing that I wanted to mention, again for the newer members, is that although House Bill 1 is a lot of work for Division 3, HHS comprises about 43% of the statewide budget. House Bill 2 is a little bit less work. Out of 470 sections in the last trailer bill. HHS comprised about 30 of them. So at least in that respect, not to minimize the importance of House Bill 2 and some of the sections in it, but at least in that respect, your workload will be a little bit lighter than some of the other divisions. You will also, as the budget process goes along, have bills to vote out of division. Last I checked, there were 7 bills in the full Finance Committee, only one of which is in Division 3, which is your Sununu Center bill. But there will definitely be more coming as the process goes along. So that brings me to what can you expect of me and what can you expect of the LBA office more generally?
Hold that thought.
Sure.
Let's talk about two things that I learned last term, and this is specifically for the newer people here. And if I'm saying it wrong, I'd like the more experienced people to correct or extend or revise my remarks. But HB2 is really very critical. And what I didn't know we should do, and what I'm thinking needs to be done, is we need to, I need to make a more concerted effort to bring HB2 items to the division early than we had them brought, so that we can discuss them and debate them. And probably if there's an area where we're going to have the most disagreement, it could be over potentially HB2 items. So because that could potentially be a source of contention, it's my intention to try to accelerate, at least bring forward, the most critical HB2 items, so that we have an opportunity for everyone to discuss it, state their positions, think about it, and to work with Mr. Ripple to create amendments. Now, are you going to talk about your firewall policy on how, okay, so let me say what I think your firewall policy is, and then you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Mr. Ripple works for all of us, okay? To the extent that he gets overwhelmed, that's kind of my responsibility to try to, set priorities if need be. But if you have things you want him to research, if you want amendments you want him to craft, that's none of my business. It's strictly between you and Mr. Ripple until you choose when and how to present your information. The one thing I would ask, though, is if you know that you're asking him for something that's we're going to want to hear in public hearing, just kind of give me the courtesy to know, so that I can prepare my head for, what we're going to do for work that day. I don't need to get into much other than, Representative Nordgren might say, hey, by the way, we have an amendment we want to discuss. Can we schedule when we're going to discuss it? I don't even particularly need to know the details beyond that. But so Mr. Ripple is, was it Austria that was the neutral country? He's sort of always neutral, always secure. You can always talk to him. And in the 2 years that I've worked with him, I've never even got a hint that there was leakage of information that wasn't appropriate. So, did I say anything wrong? You want to say any more?
Oh, I don't think so. That's very true. Yep. Any request that you make of me, anything that you come to me with, I'll keep it between us, and I won't share it unless requested to do so by you.
Representative Wallner?
Kevin, I wondered if you will be preparing, if the LBA will be preparing the document that you've prepared for us in the past, where you take House Bill 2 and you divide it up among the 3 divisions, and then each division concentrates on their parts of House Bill 2.
Yes, we will do that. So in the days or the week or so after House Bill 2 comes out, the sections will be divided up by division, and you'll get a chance to look at the ones that are allocated to Division 3, and then shortly thereafter, John Williams most likely will come in from HHS and talk about those sections, and then any requests that he or the department has that were left out of the governor's version of House Bill 2. So In terms of House Bill 2, as well as the operating budget and any other bills that come your way, typically for amendments, you would go through OLS. But in this case, you're welcome, and in fact, it's probably easier for all involved if you bring amendment ideas to me, and then I can work on them and complete them and forward them to OLS as necessary. So in the case of House Bill 1, anything numbers related typically doesn't even go through OLS. I'll prepare a spreadsheet or a document that includes the changes that you would like to make, and that'll be handed out to the full committee to vote on. In the case of House Bill 2 and other bills, they will be formal amendments that have gone through OLS, but I find it works a little bit better if they all start with me, as long as you're willing to do that. If you'd rather go to OLS first, you're certainly welcome to do that instead. So, as you suggested, Representative Edwards, I think we should get started on House Bill 2 early as soon as it comes to the division, and probably have a couple different run-throughs over the next few weeks. So you'll hear about amendments that HHS would like you to make, and you'll have your own ideas for amendments, and you might even have ideas from other bills that you would like to incorporate into House Bill 2. So we can talk about that and prepare amendments as necessary as we go along. Sure.
So to the extent that the department has HB2 items that they are comfortable talking about before the 15th of February, I'm fine with that. I think that's what you were implying, is that if they're ready early, we can start early.
Well, that makes sense. I'm not sure they'll be ready early, though, because they won't necessarily know before the 15th what the governor put in and what the governor left out, which is true not only of the trailer bill, it's true of House Bill 1 as well.
Okay. All right.
So preparing amendments is one of the things that I can do for you. I can also conduct research as requested. If there's something you'd rather come to the LBA for instead of the department, I'd certainly be happy to do that. And I'll be tracking all of this information as we go along. So I'll be tracking your requests of the department. I'll be tracking your requests of me. I'll be tracking the status of House Bill 2 sections that you've addressed and that you haven't addressed. And I'll be tracking the areas of the budget that you've addressed and haven't addressed. And I'll provide you regular updates as to your status as we go along. So the committee should never really be lost as to where you're at in the workload and what you have left to do. And then, once the division finalizes its budget work in late March, I and the other analysts will get together. We'll prepare a packet of House Bill 2 amendments that have been adopted by the division. We'll prepare a detailed change sheet which shows line by line all the budgetary changes that the division recommends to the full committee. And then we'll put those together into a packet that you, Representative Edwards, will present to the full committee to vote on in early April. So that's actually about all that I had planned on talking about today. Is there anything that I missed or anything else that you wanted to hear from?
I have some sort of supplemental chair comments on this. Earlier today, we had a conversation with Mr. Kane about lapsing versus non-lapsing, and so I don't think we need to do that again. Just for the committee, it's something we ought to keep an eye on. If the department's going to ask us to change status from lapsing to non-lapsing, that's going to be worth a discussion. I think as we go through this process, you probably know that Ways and Means comes up with the initial revenue estimates, and we can't by law spend more money than we're told that is available. So Ways and Means has to produce something that has to be get passed by the House, and then that makes available all of the dollars for the division to spend as sort of a ceiling, particularly with the general fund. Last year, I was expecting the chair of finance to say, okay, we have, $3 billion or whatever the number is, division 3, you got 51% of it, division 1, you got some other percent. I expected an initial breakdown to start our process. we didn't get that, and I don't know. I don't think we're going to get that again. Maybe the vice chair could speak to this if you know anything about it. But the way it ended up working last time was that we independently did our work, and then we went back into the kind of the finance committee of the whole, and that's when we started talking about, whether or not there was room at the end or if somebody had to start thinking about cutting. So I think the first time through, we should try to be, rational and reasonable about what we're doing, and then we may have to do some adjustments. As we go through that process, there are footnotes, those got discussed earlier. I was naive about how important it was to have a real discussion about the footnotes. And so I think I underemphasized that, at least for my own learning last time. So the footnotes, I've talked to Representative Mooney to help keep reminding me to bring those footnotes forward so that we can discuss them. And then similar to that, if there's an HB2 item that's tied to one of the departments, obviously we're going to talk about the HB2 item at the same time. I'm going to tell you the major challenge, the epiphany I had. Okay, so some of you may know that I'm a Republican. Some of you may know that what that means to me is that when I look at the government spending, I'm taking a look at programs to be effective and efficient, and to evaluate whether or not the money that we're being asked to spend is going to be spent, well. We want to behave as fiduciaries. So I thought this was going to be a fairly straightforward analytical process. I thought we could ask the departments to come in and tell us what their performance metrics were, and we could take a look at their performance metrics as a way of determining whether or not they were being effective or efficient. And I came to appreciate that the department's internal metrics are not cooked. They're not ready for prime time. So we're going to have Meredith Tellis come in and talk to us about the status. And I've told her that it's not going to be a gotcha kind of exercise. But so on one hand, we don't really have the performance metrics to look at, but then it gets a little messier because we get so much federal money, and in order to get the federal money, we have to match it oftentimes with general funds, and then there's some minimums that we have to meet and the like. And so what ends up is practically every program from a money perspective has this high level of intermingling, where if you try to pull out, some general funds, you're pulling down the federal funds, and there's a little death spiral in there that some people want to avoid. So it's not as easy to do a program, a review and analysis with an appropriate budget allocation exercise, at least not in the way I tend to view it. It's just a challenge. The other challenge is if you take a look at a program and you say, oh, look, here's an FTE. I don't really think this is a particularly great program. I want to cut that program. Well, what you're going to hear is, well, that's not really an FTE. That's Joe. And Joe, he works on 4 or 5 different programs. And so if you cut Joe from that program, he's still going to be around for the other 4 programs. So you're really not going to cut, that FTE. So it's just, what I'm just letting you know is it's going to be a challenge for those of us who really want to push on having a lean, mean department. And that's kind of the reality as I see it of working with DHHS. Representative Hull, did you have something you want to say? I saw your hand move. I didn't know if that was, you're getting ready to throw something at me or.
No, thank you. And I think the problems you just mentioned are going to be further compounded by CARES Act funding and other funding that has come in from the federal level, right? Significantly in the Health and Human Services domain that has now either created new positions or new programs, and how do we extract out what was some of those one-time payments so that we can look at that and say this new program that got started under some of these federal grants, is this something we want to continue? There's a lot of questions there because we're talking large sums of money that came in one-time grants.
So I agree with you, and I think you've brought up a related, on tangent issue, which is there was a lot of one-time money, presumably for one-time programs, and at some point that federal money is going to go away, and then somebody's going to have to be confronted with the reality of what we do with that program when there's no longer federal assistance for it, and that's going to be a tough day. And I don't know how much of that we're going to see in this budget cycle, but in theory, we could see a bunch of that. Do you have any comments on that, Mr. Ripple? No? Okay. So I guess I would encourage each of us to be, oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a question? And I'm going to have to work on pronouncing your last name. I know it starts with a T-E-L and you got a K in there somewhere. And okay. Talinsky? Talersky. I'm sorry. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, so Representative Wallner, you've been down this terrain a lot in Division 3. Is there anything I said about the difficulty of unpacking the intermingled nature of DHHS that you would say differently or you view differently?
Well, I think the department has always been really helpful to us in helping us understand the mix of federal money and how much state money we're going to need. And I think that's something as a division we need to always be reminding ourselves to ask them for those details. But they've been really good about providing that kind of information because there's a number of things. I mean, sometimes you need a one-on-one match. Sometimes it's a different mix of a match. And sometimes it's that you have to meet a level of funding, state funding from several years ago. You have to at least meet that. So I think if we just work with the department closely on those things, that they'll provide the kinds of information we need to really understand what we're responsible for funding. And as far as the federal money that's come in, I think if in fact there are areas that the department knows that there's funding mixed into the budget that was from those funds, ARPA funds or CARES funds, I think they should alert us to that. I think they've been kept fairly separated and that they're really not mixed into the budget, I think, at this point. Is that right, Kevin?
Just to cheat, I see Mr. White nodding behind you, so. Okay, so Representative Erf, did you want to say anything in this section about the intermingled nature of DHHS and the challenge? Because you really worked the spreadsheets as hard as anyone on the committee, I think.
Well, there's no doubt it's a challenge. As far as the ARPA/COVID funds go, those have all come through fiscal. And because in HB2 last time we were prevented the addition of full-time employees, all of those are part-time. So they really don't show up in the budget. They shouldn't show up in the budget. And if they do, then they should be new positions that we should be able to see, basically. So I'm not too concerned about that. Yeah, it's well, as I've discussed in the past with the chairman, I had hoped that we would get presentations from the department that really right up front tied the programs to the budget to the success rate. It doesn't sound like that's necessarily going to happen, but I think that's really what we need to be looking at in terms of trying to determine where the funds are best spent.
Okay. Mr. Chair, do you have anything you want to say in here about your expectations for Division 3?
Well, I'm looking down. I've been to the other divisions briefly. I I think you're setting up hearings on like House Bill 49. And I haven't scheduled it for the full committee yet because I keep getting day by day more bills. So I want to find out exactly how many bills I had before I set up the schedule. So you're getting in it, and we talked in Division 2, which has most of these bills, and they're kind of looking at it as an oversight rather than having the full hearing, because we'll have the full hearing in the committee anyway for all these bills. But if you're starting early, then one of the suggestions was just have the department come in and give the oversight, like on 49, what they plan, what they've done, and so on, because we may have a flood of people coming thinking this is the public hearing, and you may get, in your case, it's not as bad because you only got the one bill, but over there, if they've got 6 bills and they're trying to do them all in one day and they get flooded with all sorts of people that want to testify personally on things, it's better to try to just set it up for an overview by the department and then have the public hearing here, and your people will be better informed by the department of what to expect, but we'll fill in everybody else on the committee. So that's a little bit different than the way we've done it in the past, but it's because of the slow nature of getting all the bills to us. One other announcement I'd like to make to the Republicans is when you're done here about 2:30, we're going to meet over here in 212 for a caucus, and we expect the majority leader to be there. So I haven't got full confirmation yet whether he'll be there or not, but I'd like to meet 2:30 with the Republicans over here in 212.
Do you want to, I haven't mentioned it to anyone yet about on exec day, having you present?
Yes, when you want to exec, make sure I'm here. I want to be able to participate in all your votes. I am an ex officio member of all the divisions. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And then if exec days are really important. So if you cannot be here, if the Republicans, you got to let me or Representative Mooney know. And I would assume that the Democrats want to let Representative Nordgren and you perhaps as a fallback. Do you want to say something to that, Representative Nordgren? No, I got it. Okay, so one of the things that I've been asking about for the last couple of years, and that is, as the department has come to us, I have asked questions about whether or not we see any inequality in our healthcare system that we should be aware of and that we should be addressing. And I probably asked a question similar to that, 5 to 10 times, and almost every time I ask it, the kind of comments I get after the committee meeting is, well, why is he asking that? Well, I've been asking that to get my head ready for a lot of the bills I think we're going to be hearing this year that will involve diversity, inclusiveness, and equity. And so it seems to me that in general, based on what I've been hearing over the last 2 years, New Hampshire's a pretty good place in terms of making sure our healthcare system works for everyone. But I think we should all continue to test that. One of the things that that we heard during the joint economic briefing was a professor from UNH. Were you there still, Representative Wallner, when he presented? I thought he was going to leave us those slides, but those slides apparently are proprietary, and he's not going to. I'm going to have to ask him for some of them. But some of them were excellent in terms of like identifying very specifically where in New Hampshire we have kind of a disproportionate number of the local demographic qualifying for low income or minority status. And so I'm going to continue to try to get those diversity maps because I think it would make us all smarter when we hear about the concerns being brought to us by advocates to ensure equality I prefer the word equality to equity, but I won't get into that. But we that we can all sort of be doing our own sanity check and due diligence to make sure that New Hampshire is a good place for everyone to live. I just have a few thoughts on decorum, and we're going to be broadcasting all the time. This is a pretty professional group, and I think the state expects a seriousness of their finance and ways and means committees and some other committees. I just hope that we continue to present professionally to the public, because we're now more visible than we were 2 terms ago. So I just think we should be careful about that. One of the things that I tend to do is when there's a person testifying and somebody asks a question, many chairmen, if not most, expect that the second or third question you come back to the chairman, say, I have a follow-up, or I have another question, or, there's sort of this staccato back and forth that I don't really care for. So what I'm willing to do is, if you would like to ask questions, if you could just give me some idea, like I got 2 or 3 questions I'd like to ask, then I would like you to just go have that sort of question and answer without, being interrupted by coming back to the chair, because that doesn't add any value as far as I'm concerned. The value that gets added, though, is if somebody goes off on a tangent and starts asking too many questions or something. I reserve the right to gavel and retake control of the Q&A. But other than that, I'd much rather sit here and enjoy a really great educational conversation between the legislator and the person providing the testimony, and not be thinking about the, sort of the format and the rules and stuff. I just as soon let those conversations take place. And that was kind of the operating rule of thumb last term. And Representative Wallner, you were still incredibly polite. You kept coming back to me to ask me for a second question and stuff. I just want to assure you, I really mean it this term. If you want to just, continue a natural dialogue, that's perfectly fine. And I think last term, I can only remember one time. Maybe there were 2 times, but I can only remember one time where it got a little heated. And there was only one sort of bad gavel moment. And so I take responsibility for that, because it was the first time I'd experienced it. I think I behaved in my authority, but I probably didn't, what I did was okay. How I did it was probably subject to review. But so I just intend to just treat everyone with respect. I don't see us as a group of partisans. I see us as a group of fiduciaries trying to figure out, how do we make these programs work for our citizens, and how do we do it in a way in which we protect taxpayers. So those are kind of the things I wanted to talk about. Are there any other comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Clerk. I want to acknowledge and thank you profusely for accepting the vital role of being our clerk. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and it's an honor. And I guess it's been 4 years since you and I first served on committee together. I haven't seen any instance where we've had to bang the gavel and go against each other. If it happens, we'll get by it. But I don't expect it will. Looking forward to the work again. I have a question. You mentioned earlier today that you had a second priority. I think it was employment. A priority. It sounds like a budget priority for the committee. Do you?
Okay. I may not be responding on point,
Okay.
but Mr. Ripple, to kick off, listed like 8 strategic topics that we're going to go over. We're going to try to start with IT very early on, if not number one.
Okay.
We're going to take the manpower overview as a very high priority, if not number two, and the rest of them are in there, and they're priorities because we're going to talk about them programmatically before the 15th of February.
Okay.
Does that address your question?
Yeah, I think so. And so the things like Glencliff and the New Hampshire hospitals, the input that you got are things that you're kind of adding to that list or integrating into that list of what we're going to be doing and getting a jump on before February 15th. Is that
Right, right. So by sitting in with HHS to see that their committee do the orientation, that obviated having us do the same thing with DHHS, which gives us even more dead time to fill between now and the 15th of February, and that's where I think we can do good work and just look at the programmatic levels without the dollars associated.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Wait a second. We have to test me. It's an eyesight test. Tulersky?
Excellent. Perfect.
Okay, Tulersky. Thank you.
Quick question on your time management and scheduling and how you handle it. I know we got notifications the division would be meeting starting at 10 a.m. 2 days coming up, maybe in 2 weeks. I'm just curious, when we get those notices, should we assume it's a morning and afternoon session, or is that specifically a morning session and a 1 p.m. meeting time would be also issued if we were going to be in the afternoon?
That's an excellent question. At this point, you should have already begun receiving Division III finance notices. I know that for sure February 1st and 3rd went out, as did the 27th or whatever that date is. Or I just want to make sure I understand. Did you get those or not?
I did, and they say 10 a.m. Only, and I'm just curious if that is to be expected to have a full day with the afternoon also.
Initially, these first ones, I don't think we could fill a whole day because we're working around the department a bit, and so we're probably going to have 1 or 2 or 3 of these sessions, depending on the ability of the department to cooperate and coordinate schedules with us. So I think if we start at 10, which is a general good start time, then we could be done by 12:30 generally. And if we can't, we'll recess, go eat some lunch, and try to wrap it up. Do you have any thoughts on that? I
Nope.
mean, you're in Nashua,
Yes.
right? So I'm trying to figure. So Representative Stringham, you're actually the one that travels the furthest, are you not? Does anyone travel more than an hour? You're what? How far are you? Hour and 15. So if we start at 10 o'clock as a rule, Representative Nordgren, does that give you plenty of time to get here? If we try to start at 9 or 9:30, is that an inconvenience for you? So, yeah. I can't help you with 89. Mr. Ripple's good, but he's not that good. So. Okay, so for now, I think we're going to start at standard 10 o'clock and go until complete. And until we get to the 15th of February, those days are going to be pretty light. So, all right. Anything else? Representative Mooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And while we have Mr. Ripple still, I just wanted to take this opportunity to just briefly discuss the budget LBA tab of the website. There is a huge amount of information there, which is all very helpful. Is there anything in particular you'd like to point out to the committee or those that may be watching that could be helpful as we begin this journey?
Well, I think you could take a look at the previous session, the 22-23 budget, and maybe take a look at one thing that I know you asked for and that the committee might find helpful is every 2 years the department presents a briefing book that consists of all accounting units with at least $1 million in them. So that'll be coming out for the upcoming budget sometime after February 15th, late February maybe. But you can take a look at the one for 22, 23 to get a sense of what's in there and where the big dollars are. So that may be helpful to look at. You can also look at, I'm not sure how helpful the surplus statement would be at this point, but you talked about lapse, Representative Edwards. The surplus statement is a great place to go to see the big picture, not just of HHS, but the statewide budget as a whole, to show you where the appropriations are, not only in HB1, but also in HB2 or any other bills, to show you the expected lapse, to show you the projected revenues, and sort of get a sense of how that fits together for the overall state budget. So those are two documents that I might take a look at right off the bat.
So this is kind of in the informal times. Mr. Williams, Mr. White, you have anything that you want to volunteer for the good of the cause? I don't know if we've technically met you yet, so.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Nathan White. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Health and Human Services. I didn't prepare anything formal today. It was more just here to be a fly on the wall, but I think everything that's been said here has been pretty accurate about the complexities of DHHS's budget. Unfortunately, with DHHS, and fortunately for better or for worse, when we do look at positions or we look at programs, oftentimes there is a federal match component. For example, many of our contracts per se may have up to 10 various funding sources. So we do braid and blend funding to try to best leverage the federal funds that are available and the limited general funds. So I just want to reiterate that everything that's been said around that is certainly true. Kevin was just referring to the budget briefing book. We are working on updated budget briefing books, and our plan right now is to start to look at incorporating some of those key outcomes and performance metrics into that budget briefing book so that we can have a document that's a little bit more unified so that you can look at the big $1 million accounts. And then within that document is great because it has, here are the RSA requirements that we need to consider. Here's the population. Here's the mechanism, the delivery of service. Is it direct care from HHS? Is it done on through a contracted service, so forth and so on. But what we're really trying to do is update that, and I've had a couple of conversations with Representative Erf about that to try to make that document a little bit more tangible, to really tie the numbers to the program, and try to get away from those presentations where we talk about the program over here and then we talk about the budget, and it's really hard to make those connections between HB1, which on its face does not really have a lot of description and supporting documentation to really explain that. So we are working on that right now. We are also working on those presentations that have been requested for the DOIT presentation initially, and then the subsequent presentations on February 1st and February 3rd. So that's a quick overview. Just a couple of general comments. I know that Kevin will act as the conduit for members of the committee. I will do my best to get any requests that you have in as timely a manner as possible. Our department, as you probably heard, we are at about 22% vacancy depending on the day. So we do have limitations. So if you're able to get those requests in earlier, that will just be really helpful, because I know that the budget process, it's 5 weeks, it goes really quick. And to the extent that we have my staff and my team and the other division directors, so forth and so on, have time available to try to get answers for you as quickly as possible, that will just help, I think, make the process go better. But again, through this whole process, I'll be as candid and open and honest with all of you as I can be. Please don't hesitate to reach out. If you do have questions, more than happy to have any conversations offline on any specific topics as well.
So I want to just tell you that you're stepping into some tough shoes to fill. I really appreciated working with Karen Rounds last cycle. The thing that impressed me about Karen was even when something was somewhere in the department, some professional little goof up that they were fixing, there was no dodging or hiding, and it's a huge organization, so there's always going to be room to fix little things. And so what was nice about those instances was knowing that she was being transparent and honest, because that sort of sets the stage for some of the bigger questions that we end up needing to rely on the answer. So early on in the cycle, I, as a rule, always kind of went through Mr. Ripple to the department. I got to tell you though, as we got very close to that deadline where Division 3 had to shut down, there were a lot of conversations with Karen, like the weekend before kind of stuff. And so I think the rule of thumb is we'd like to go ahead and use a proper coordination process, and just try not to create too much chaos, except that gets imposed on us at the end. But your reputation is good. People I know who have met and worked with you in the past, they have nothing but good things to say. So looking forward to a great cycle.
Thank you. I look forward to it as well.
Yeah. All right. With that, I noticed there are a lot of people in the audience. This is unusual for an orientation. Is there anyone, and thank you, Mr. White. Is there anyone in the audience who has a desire to speak to the committee? Tell us what you want. Tell us what you need. Anything? Anyone? You don't even have to fill out a pink card. Okay. So I think we're wrapped up on our orientation. I'll take a motion. Do we need a motion? A second? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. We are adjourned. Republicans, don't forget your 2:30 meeting.